Call to order the Newbury Planning and Zoning Board meeting for Tuesday, January 9th, 2018 at 6 p.m. We'll have an approval of the agenda, which is call to order, approval of the agenda, Pledge of Allegiance, approval of the November 6, 2017 and December 4th, 2017 minutes, new business, which are two items, quasi-judicial hearing for V 17-03 and a legislative public hearing for ordinance 2018-01. Old business, topic from members for discussion and adjournment. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, did everybody have an opportunity to look over the minutes for November 6th and December 4th?
Move to approve the minutes for both of the November and December meetings.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded for approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Our new business, first item is quasi-judicial hearing, V 17-03, an application by Daslin St. Martin DSM Holdings LLC owners for a variance petition to allow the placement of a freestanding sign that exceeds current allowable sign height dimensions as defined in the City of Newbury Land Development Regulations in a commercial general CG zoning district. The property is located on 25050 West Newbury Road. As this is a quasi-judicial meeting, the procedure is to ensure that the applicant provides a complete presentation of their request prior to any testimony being provided by the staff. All public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts, and closing arguments will be limited to the evidence of record. The procedure we will follow this evening is that we will first hear from the applicant. The applicant presentation has no time limit. Second, the applicant will then be subject to cross-examination. The staff will then enter the staff report into the record and answer questions. Fourth, the applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony against the application. The floor will then be open for public comment. Each presentation will be limited to 5 minutes. The members of the public will have an opportunity to question the applicant or the staff. The applicant will have an opportunity for closing arguments. The public hearing will be closed and the commission will enter into deliberations. Anyone wishing to speak on behalf of or during this quasi-judicial meeting should stand now and raise your right hand and take the oath. Please raise your right hand. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. All right. First, we would hear from the applicant regarding the petition.
Mr. Chair, while the applicant's making his way up, at this time I'd like to inquire if any member of the Planning and Zoning Board has any ex parte communication on this application B 17-03 that they'd like to now put on the record. And I see everyone shaking their heads in the negative, so thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, sir.
Hi, I'm Bill Ryan with Ryan Markland Signs. We were here back in July. We have redesigned the sign, made it much smaller. We did install the sign that is at the location now that does comply with the code. We want to take that existing sign and just raise it above the roof of cars so that vehicles won't be blocking it and it won't be blocking vehicles trying to get in and out of the parking lot. That is basically what we're looking to do. There was some comment in the last meeting by the city attorney, I believe, about self-imposed hardship. And I didn't get a chance to really express the fact that this is not really a self-imposed hardship. We did with this property like we do with all properties. We go to the city, we bring drawings, we see what's allowed. We did speak with Mr. Thomas. He did say that the original sign, which was 18 feet tall and bigger than this one, would not be a problem. So that was prior to Dr. St. Martin purchasing this property. And there's a number of properties that we have run into situations where he can't get what he wants as far as signage, and he's not bought the property. I don't know that that would have happened with this one, but he didn't have that opportunity to have that information. He was under the impression that he could get that 18-foot sign, the much bigger sign, and when in fact he couldn't. So if anything, this is more of a city-imposed hardship, not a self-imposed hardship. Other than that, all we're asking for is to get the sign up above the roof of cars so that it can be viewed. The same sign that's there now. We don't want to make it any bigger, which is much smaller than our original proposal. I also have some photographs that I would like to pass out if that's allowable.
You just gotta make sure that the city retains a copy of whatever you pass out.
I got copies here. This is in relation to the Hardy sign that we had a slide up on the screen last meeting. Unfortunately, I did not have the dimensions of that Hardy sign at that time. What was presented to you was much, much bigger than we actually were proposing. It was much bigger and much taller. Actually 165% larger than we were proposing and 25% taller than we were proposing, what you were shown. So at that last meeting, it was impossible for you to really have a true idea of what we were proposing in relation to that Hardy sign. I do have other pictures depicting those signs from the last meeting. I don't know if this would be the time to give them to you, or if it's necessary to give them to you, or...
You're Dr. Martin?
No,
Is that- no,
I'm
I'm
Bill
sorry.
Ryan. I own the sign company.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
This is the time for you to give your presentation, so if you've got anything that you want this board
Okay.
to consider, then absolutely now is the time to do so.
This is a stack, and I'll go through them. Now, the first picture, unfortunately, I attempted to get a copy of the picture and could not get that. But I did realize that the meeting was on YouTube, so I took a screenshot. And this is the screen from that actual meeting. It's a little blurry, so it's hard to really tell. But that is what you were shown. The second picture shows what you actually should have been shown in scale. And I'm sure that it was just an inadvertent mistake, but it was just not what we were requesting. The third picture, I superimposed the actual sizes of both the Hardy sign and the sign as it was presented to you, and all the way to the left of the sign that we really requested. And in the middle, that's just a clearer shot, clearer picture of the same thing. And then the last page is a drawing, so you can see what was presented to you, which was actually 165% larger and 25% taller than we were asking for. The sign on the left is what we are actually asking for. So I can understand our last meeting, how, I know there was discussion about the sign being the biggest sign in Newberry and so forth, and it will be far from that. And then I have one more group of pictures. These are pictures of signs with the sign that we are proposing today in relation to some signs that you already have in the city. The three of them are older signs that are grandfathered in. The fourth sign, the one for the elementary school, is a new sign that both exceeds the height and the square footage of your code. We are requiring or requesting a little bit more height, but less square footage overall. Then the sign that just went in for the elementary school, or middle school, I'm sorry. But again, all we're asking is that we take the sign that's in front of the building now and raise it to be over the top of existing cars, or cars that would park on both sides of the existing sign.
Anything else from the applicant? No. All right. Questions from the board? I have a question. When is the city planning on vote, or when is the commission planning on making this vote? Do we know?
Mr. Chair, the first opportunity would be the first meeting in February. Reason being, not knowing what the outcome of today's hearing would be. We couldn't place the ads were due today to provide public notice for the meeting on the 22nd of January. And so, not knowing the outcome of today's hearing, rather than take the chance on putting in ads that then would then have to be retracted, it would have to go to the first meeting in February, which is I believe the 12th.
Okay. So if I understood that correctly, the commission is waiting on us to make a recommendation rather than us preempt the commission. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And so with passage of that, it would certainly put this sign in compliance then. If the commission votes very.
The commission has, Mr. Chair, the commission has the authority to grant the variance.
Okay.
And whether they follow the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Board or not is up to the Board of Adjustment. City Commission acting as the Board of Adjustment, but they usually take the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Board pretty seriously.
But much like you guys are in a quasi-judicial proceeding, which basically says that you're going to take the competent, substantial evidence that is presented to you and make a decision. The Board of Adjustment, the City Commission acting as the Board of Adjustment, will have to do the same. So they will certainly pay attention to the recommendations of this board, but they'll have to have the same material presented to them as well.
So I don't recall all the discussion on our initial meeting, but certainly it would seem like, as I recall, there was a fair bit of discussion on some alternative sign placement locations.
Yes.
But you still went ahead and placed the sign on the ground in a parking area.
Well, we had to put it where it could be seen. We had to put it, and we had to do something to get this location opened and get the best visibility we thought we could with what we had. To put it in the grass area, it would have been blocked by the building. We couldn't get it up above the building because of the height restriction. That would be the only way we could have put it in a grass area. At the other end of the street, blocking the end of the drive, it would have been the same situation. This way, we felt it was closer to the intersection. It's a small sign, it's hard to see anyway, so the closer to the intersection, the better.
I know,
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jessica.
Why I know I think we tabled this the last time we heard
Yes.
this. And with all of the information you just provided to us, why have you requested the sign height be just under 7 feet instead of the original 10? Since
Well-
the sign was,
Mr. Thomas and I discussed it, and we felt that that would be reasonable and not obtrusive or too big. We wanted to keep it as low as possible to appease the board, but still accomplish what we needed it to do, was to be seen over vehicles. So that's basically, at that height, it will be visible over vehicles, and that's all we really need. We don't need it way up in the air.
what's the roof height of the building?
Mr. Chair, if I remember correctly, the measurement to the roof height is right at about 14 feet. So the sign as proposed would not exceed the existing height of the roof line on the building. It would be right about at the same height.
Okay. And I do remember, I mean, it's not our job to tell you where to place it or anything like that, but did you work with staff here for alternative
You know,
areas? Like, I mean, I think something had been suggested about putting it at the entrance of that parking lot, and, you know,
on the west end.
on the west end of the parking lot instead of, you know, right in front where you need your parking.
Well, at the west end, it would have given us the same problem. It still would have had cars pulling in, parking next to it, not being visible. And it would have been that much farther away from the intersection. And as it is such a small sign, the farther away it is, the harder it is to read. So we wanted it as close to the intersection as we could get it. That was our objective.
Well, are you, I know most cars are about maybe 4.5 foot to the roof height. Most trucks are just under 6 foot, if the newer trucks are just under 6 foot to the roof height. You're wanting to go up 7 foot to the bottom of the sign. I mean, is there any possibility of lowering it a little bit, or, okay, what part, I mean, are you wanting the whole sign to be visible? Are you needing the digital part to be visible? Is this, something you're needing to be visible at night, or?
Well, we
I mean,
certainly
what
want
is-
the whole sign visible. The name of the business is very important, and the logo is very important. This is his 9th location, so he does a lot of advertising with that logo, and logo recognition is very important. So we would want the whole sign to be visible. We probably, we discussed the 7 feet. I think most people would not run into it at 7 feet. If you get it down more at a high level, you need to have some kind of barriers to keep people from maybe hitting their heads and so forth. Your average minivan or so is 6 foot or so. We just wanted to be above that. Minivans, pickup trucks, so forth.
And would you say that this is a realistic picture, or
I
is it
went out-
approximate?
Yeah, no, that is within inches. I went out, I personally measured the Hardy sign, and that is our sign. I scaled everything and did that. All those pictures are within inches, not feet.
So a question on that picture that Mr. Boyer just showed. It has the white sign on the top, whereas in the application, you've got the digital sign on the top. So what is the layout actually going to be?
The digital sign
Because we've
is on
got
the
conflicting
top.
pictures.
Yeah, I didn't realize I did that. We did originally, well, on this sign, yeah, this was our original sign. Actually, this is the sign that was shown. We moved the digital sign to the top because the sign being on the ground, we felt we could advertise, at least get that up high enough where it is now to advertise, even if we had to put quick care med on that, if the sign is so blocked down below. So we did flip it from its original design. But the sign that is there now has a digital sign on top, and that should be what our application shows.
Yes, so.
Do we have any,
So let me, excuse me. You're worried about visibility, but you put the logo sign on the bottom.
Yeah, we felt the digital sign is more important. Because we can even put the name.
But
of
you
it.
just told me the logo and.
Oh, it's very
and-
important.
Okay,
But we can put Quick Care Med on the digital sign also. We can't put the logo on it, but we can put the name of the company.
But you understand my quandary here. You just told me that the logo was the most important thing, but then
Oh,
you
no,
put it
not
on the
the
bottom
most
where it was.
important. No, it is very
You
important.
used the term important.
It's very important.
Okay, very
Logo
important.
is very important. It's important for advertising, it's important for logo identification, for all the different locations. It's very important, but
So-
it's not necessarily the most important.
Right.
The most important may be the message that he needs to put up there at that time. If it's the beginning of school, it may be school physicals.
Okay.
It's whatever we could do to get people to come into the business. That is the most important thing, is to get people through the front door. That's, a lot of people lose sight of what the sign's primary purpose is, and that's what it is to get people through the door of any business, regardless of what it is.
Well, you had a question or comment?
yeah, I had forgot, what is the current max height ordinance, or for the ordinance?
Sure, yes, it's 8-foot maximum right now in basically any setting.
So one of the other comments you make in here is you're worried about damage. Are you worried about damage to the pole?
Well, right now, the sign.
Right, you're worried about damage to the sign with it on the ground. Are you worried about damage to the pole? And
No, we
Once you elevate
actually
it.
want to put and I believe the drawing shows a little planter box around the sign to keep cars away from the pole and try to go under the sign.
I don't believe that drawing was included.
That was our original application drawing. The drawing that you had before I gave you any of the pictures. But at any rate, that's what we intended, was to put a small planter around the perimeter of the sign to protect the sign and keep cars or anybody from trying to scoot in someplace they won't fit.
So currently at 7 feet, your digital sign is already visible above vehicles, right?
It depends on the vehicle. If it's a minivan or a truck, no. Even the roof of a car will block it somewhat.
That's an awfully large car.
I had pictures, but I don't have them.
You seen some of those trucks the boys ride around?
Well, I've seen, well, truck and car are different things. I can- Other questions for the applicant? All right. Does the staff have a report to enter?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, I think you can be seated for a while.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll call you back for any opportunity for rebuttal.
It's coming.
Okay.
Okay, as stated, the current LDRs limit the sign height to 8 feet tall maximum. Applicants requested variance to allow them to go to a total of 14 feet, which would be 7 feet taller than their current 8 feet. The current sign face limitation, if you're going to do a two-sided freestanding sign, is 50 feet. They are compliant with that. They're right at about 99 square feet total. And this was the depiction that was printed as the modified sign. So you'd have basically the existing sign that they have now, which is approximately 7 feet tall, 7 feet wide, and then you'd add just under 7 feet to the base, as the applicant stated, to bring it above the sight line for the top of the cars, minivans, trucks, and such. So, I did go out and try to take some pictures, and as the applicant stated, the scale was off, and I do believe during the original application I mentioned that these weren't necessarily to scale because I don't have the equipment available. I was just trying to give some perspective. I think obviously his is, when you look at the Hardee's sign, since he actually went out and measured it and created the actual scale, his is more accurate than that. But it is, even at this scale, considerably smaller than the previous one, and smaller than the Hardee's sign. This is a picture of the existing sign as it sits now. From this angle you can see it, but of course this is not the angle from the street. This is the angle from a side street. Go ahead. And a little bit better to scale, because I had the actual sign to work with, that would be the approximate view of what it would look like if they were granted the variance to raise it up that 7 feet. Here's a shot that does show a pretty substantial truck blocking the view, at least of the lower section, which of course is why the applicant requests the variance, because we do have a lot of large vehicles in Newberry, a lot of large trucks and minivans. This is the view from across the intersection. Not a good shot up on the screen. You can't really see the sign much at all. But it is just to the right of that car. And unfortunately, discovered that pointers disappear on our new on our new screens. They don't work, and so, but it is visible, but not. It doesn't stand out necessarily because it is lower to the ground. Another angle from closer up, that's the existing sign, and then again trying to scale what it would look like modified. It'd be approximately that, which again you can't from the angle necessarily see it, but it would be roughly equivalent to the height of the roof line for the building. Again, and then just from a little bit farther back, another shot.
Well, how much do you have left, Brian?
That's the last one.
Sir.
Well, you have the slide up there. She could have got out here and made it a little more this angle, because as you look down here, Pickett's has got a 17-foot sign, and Ham's has got a 17-foot sign, and you can see this would be right in line with the other signs that you're looking at down the street. It's not going to be something new to the neighborhood.
Actually, I think the last slide is an angle like you just mentioned. So. No. Well, it doesn't go far enough west, but you can see where, as traffic goes by from this angle, pretty much any vehicle is going to block off the view of the sign. When you're at this is headed north in the left-hand turn lane to turn west onto State Road 26, and so. I actually had to take a couple of different shots because as vehicles went by, it completely blocked the sign. You wouldn't be able to see it at all. So, which kind of makes the point that the applicant is making, is that it is difficult to see with the traffic going by at a number of different positions. And so, for that reason, the staff does recommend approval of the variance, allowing the total sign height up to 14 feet. At 14 feet, it's staff does not believe it's out of line with existing, grandfathered signs, existing signs, and while we don't have the new sign ordinance drafted yet, we think it would be something that would fall well within the guidelines of what we're likely to be presenting for a new sign ordinance in the future. So,
Any questions for staff? All right. Seeing no additional questions for the staff, if the applicant has an opportunity to rebut or add any testimony against or regarding staff's presentation.
I would just like to thank you for this opportunity, and we, hopefully you'll look favorably on our request. If there's any other questions of me. Thank you.
All right. All right, at this time, the floor is open for any public comment. Those that are wishing to make a comment, remember, you'll be limited to 5 minutes. If you haven't already been sworn, you'll have to be sworn before you make any comments. Anyone from the public like to address the board? Were you previously sworn? All right. If you will, raise your right hand. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
All right, please state your name.
George William Freeman. Call me Bill. Okay,
All right, thank
just a quick comment. I agree. Everything you see in the sign is very, very hard to see during the daytime. At night, it's almost blinding. It's very much out of character during the daytime or during nighttime. Is there anything that they can do or it can be addressed to get that glaring, bright electronic sign to fit more into the historic nature of our downtown? That's pretty much my only comment. It's jarring coming down that street at night, even though I know that they've made some attempts to get it a little less noticeable, but it's still, it doesn't fit. I'm sorry. Doesn't fit in with our downtown.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from the audience? You'll have an opportunity here in just a second. I want to make sure. All right, going once, going twice. All right. Yes, the applicant now has an opportunity for closing arguments.
In reference to the brightness, the signs are programmable. This should have been set to reduce the brightness at dusk. It's possible that it hasn't been done. I will check into that. We certainly don't want anything that is upsetting to the neighborhood or any other citizens. We want to fit in. So we will make sure that we can tone down the brightness and make it acceptable. Other than that.
All right. Thank you, sir. Now, the board will, the public hearing is now closed and the commission will enter into deliberations. So any comments, questions, discussion amongst the board members?
Let's
Start with Mr. Conrad.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any problem with it at all. We did, the planner before Brian Lowell did a study one time, and it found that like 90% of the signs in Newberry are non-conforming to our sign ordinance. And we wrote that sign ordinance, which was before I came on the commission 10 years ago. It was kind of copied from the county's sign ordinance, which is very draconian and has the 8-foot height limit, which is a very low limit for cities, because a lot of cities say your height limit is the limit of the roof line of the building or something like that. But I would challenge you to drive through Jonesville, where all the signs conform to the 8-foot limit, and see, if you didn't know where the stores were, see if you could find Publix, or see if you could find Tractor Supply. And businesses like the Sports Authority went out of business because they had to have this 8-foot sign, which if somebody plants a tree there, you can't see it, or parks a car. You just can't see where the businesses are. It's very business unfriendly, I think, to hold people to that limit. I think it's the intention of the commission to rewrite the sign ordinance, and they're working on it now, to be more business friendly and allow, especially new businesses, because they're the only ones that comply. The old businesses they've had signposts up there forever, and they can build them as high as they want. So I apologize to the doctor for starting a new business and having to go through all this to get your sign up. It should be a lot easier than that. But no, I don't have any problem at all with it. I think it's fine. It's similar to other signs that are already in the neighborhood. And, I'm glad to see the new business in town.
Mr. Boyer?
I'm actually surprised, but I would support the variance as well. One of the things that I really wish that we could talk to the owner about would be, after hours, is he willing to cut the digital part of the sign off, turn it off, so it's not such an eyesore to our citizens, and, as they're driving past there. But that's one of the things that, that go through my mind when I hear the complaints from the citizens about the sign and its brightness. I don't know their hours, so.
Sure.
That's it.
The only thing that I agree with the gentleman about the sign, the brightness of it. When you talk about 264th Street, where that little crest is coming into town, it's just a big glare. I mean, it's really bright.
Ms. Maker, any comments?
I have no problem with the request, so.
Certainly, I think the pictures that Brian took were very telling as to the need to grant the variance in terms of sign visibility. Certainly, I think maybe the city commission needs to address maybe a lumens issue for brightness of lit signs, but it's outside our purvey. That's something they can take up, so. Any other comments, questions, discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd point out that that could be part of the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Board, is to grant the variance with the provision that they reduce the lumens at night or something along those lines. So you could make that as part of the recommendation if that was the will of the board.
So the question for you, I used the term, but I'm not sure what a lumens limitation, an appropriate one would be. I mean, I know we measure brightness in lumens, but I don't know what a normal amount would be, so it'd be tough to make that recommendation.
Point.
Got a question from the audience?
My question from the audience, the public hearing is closed, though. Yes.
My name,
So we need to swear him in? Okay. Raise your right hand. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please state your name.
As y'all know, my name's Walker. I own the produce stand next door, across the street from this business. The way the sign is now, it blocks more than if they put it up in the air. I mean, there's a new business coming to town. That sign's not a cheap sign. I mean, it's a whole lot damn more than my signs. I'll tell you what, I'll take my sign down if you prove theirs. How's that? Really, I think it, don't you do it. Don't you do it, Bill.
Get that in the form
But I
of a
think it would be
recommendation.
much better for them if you get it up higher, people can see it, and I can see what's happening on the other side. And it's another step in getting a sign ordinance the way it should be here in the city of Newberry. And as far as I was saying, the height of the building, if you looked at the BP station or the Kangaroo, whatever what it is, look how high their sign is. Picket sign, the sign right down the road at the realtor's office. You know, I mean, all of them are this size, and to say that as expensive as that sign is, I understand there should have been some more planning on it, what it was. But I think it would be fine. Any questions?
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank y'all for listening to me.
All right.
Are we ready to entertain a motion?
I think if the appropriate juncture would be to to have a motion one way or the other.
I would like to make a motion to approve V1703 with the added verbiage of maybe having the city commission look at the lumens issue, maybe whether turning it off at night when they're not at the facility or dimming it so it's not seen in Archer.
We've got a motion for approval with direction to the city commission to address the issue of brightness with the lumens limitation.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Pull my agenda back up. All right, we need to announce the date the application will first be heard by the Board of Adjustment, which will be
February 12th.
February 12th, 2018. So the Board of Adjustment will take that under consideration at that point. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the legislative public hearing for ordinance 2018-01, designated as LDR 18-02, an application by the City of Newberry to amend the text of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations. The proposed changes are related to allowing accessory dwelling units in agricultural and residential single-family zoning districts. This is not a quasi-judicial issue. Okay.
Legislative hearing where you be setting, recommending policy for the city commission to adopt.
You want me to read summary, or do you want to?
No, sir, I'm part of, we're waiting for the, it's coming.
All right,
There we go.
excellent.
This literally is the first time we've used the new technology, so we're,
That's right, they didn't use them last night.
well, we did, but
I say not much.
yeah, this is first time for planning and zoning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This item came up, over the course of the last couple of years, we've had a number of requests from citizens about the possibility of amending our LDRs to allow for an accessory dwelling unit on their single-family residences. And so over the course of that time, we did some research on which communities allow it, when they allow it, what are some of the criteria that they have for allowing an accessory dwelling unit. And the staff report will go through some of the items of what constitutes an accessory dwelling unit. So, is that you or me? It worked. Okay. So basically, an accessory dwelling unit is a fully furnished second unit that goes with a primary residence. And so it can be attached, it can be detached, either one. But basically, as it stands right now, we allow, say, an attached suite of some sort, but they can't have a full kitchen. It can't be a fully functional unit. You can have bathrooms, but you can't have a full kitchen. So you wouldn't have something where you could have claim it to be a fully functional residential unit in any of our single-family residential districts. That must have been you. Some of the need for this is basically as the baby boom generation continues to age, there's more and more of a push for children to either bring their parents onto their property so that they can help take care of them as they age, or for the parents to have the children move back to help them as they age, to care for each other, as an alternative to, say, nursing homes and those kind of things. There's a much bigger movement for in-home care and being in close proximity to your family. It does tend to increase property values because you're adding that second residence, you're constructing a second residence. And in most communities, once the need for the space for the parent or the child, depending on which way they're going, as they move out, it can provide retirement retirement income or additional rental income, depending on who's left with the primary residence. Right now, the City of Newberry, the only provision we have for something similar to an accessory dwelling unit is in the agricultural zoning district, where you're allowed to have a 5 and by extension 10-year mobile home added to your property for a family member only. The way the code is written, that was to facilitate a similar concept where you could bring family home, but it's temporary, and it was 10 years, and it was basically limited to a mobile home. It wasn't, you couldn't build a second, site-built residence. The accessory dwelling units, in addition to your current house or a cottage or something, that you can build them again, like I mentioned, but you can't have fully functional kitchens, or they could be a completely independent, separate unit. Some of the other area communities surrounding us, unincorporated Alachua County, City of Alachua, High Springs, and several Central Florida communities. It's becoming much more common for communities to allow it. I know for years it's been the practice in higher density areas, California, New York, and those places where you have extreme rental shortages. But the need is different here in that it's really to facilitate families in the aging population. The only one that I was kind of surprised Gainesville doesn't currently have, but they're looking at adopting an accessory dwelling unit ordinance. Some of the common limitations is that either the primary residence or in the accessory unit, the owner has to reside. And so you don't end up with a situation where you have just basically 2 rentals on a single-family residence. Some of the ordinances require you to connect to existing utility systems, whether it's centralized water and sewer, whether it's on well and septic. It has to be designed with the same architectural style of the existing residence to maintain the look and feel of the existing residence, so that it blends well into the neighborhood and the surrounding community. And it's usually limited in size. You can't build another unit the same size or more. It's usually limited somewhere around the 50% range of the existing primary residence. Some additional, if you provide off-street parking, you at least 1 space per bedroom, and you have to use the same driveway. Mobile homes and RVs typically are not allowed. Travel trailers not allowed as an accessory dwelling unit usually ever, except for very short terms, like a couple of days as people visit. But mobile homes and RVs, or excuse me, mobile homes even aren't usually acceptable as an accessory dwelling unit unless it's in the agricultural district or in a district that already allows mobile homes as single-family residential. Pretty much uniformly, 1 additional accessory dwelling unit per lot, so that you don't inadvertently set up a multifamily situation in a single-family residential district. It has to be sold as part of the primary residence, unless you actually go through the process to split the lots. You split 2 separate lots to making 2 separate parcels, and then in some areas home occupations are prohibited in accessory dwelling units, but some areas do allow it. So some of the provisions that we put in the draft ordinance would be to, of course, limit 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot, per unit. It would be allowed, at least the initially, for the discussion purposes, allow it in all zoning districts which currently limit you to single-family residences. It could be attached or detached. It would definitely, we think that it's important to have it designed in the same style as the principal dwelling unit, so that it doesn't appear to be a separate, entire separate structure from the primary unit. And we definitely would recommend that parking be on the same lot and use the same driveway as the initial dwelling unit, rather than creating a separate entrance. it would, of course, have to comply with the zoning standards for the district it's in. So if it's in single-family residential, it would, in single-family residential 1, 2, or 3, whatever the setbacks, for instance, requirements for those lots, or the minimum lot size it would still have to comply with that. Owner occupancy would be required, and to prove that, basically, you show your homestead exemption. If you're building new, for instance, you would have you'd sign an affidavit basically saying that the applicant's going to occupy one of the residences, whether it's the ADU or the primary. We would suggest that you limit the living area of the accessory dwelling unit to 50%, no more than 50% of the existing principal residence, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is greater. Of course, I think we already stated, it's a reiteration, one per lot, and at the sale, it would have to be sold as part of the primary residence, unless you actually had a situation where you had enough land that you could actually subdivide the lot legally and create two separate residences at that time. And that's the main points of the draft ordinance. We welcome discussion on additional provisions or reducing some of the provisions that are presented here.
Comments from the board?
Is there a lot size limitation for having an ADU added?
Mr. Chair, that would, that's where the zoning districts come in. They would have to still comply with the provisions of the zoning district, and there's usually, say for instance, if you're in a residential single-family 2 zoning district, you have to have a minimum lot size for that district of 10,000 square feet. And so if you were looking at new construction or creating a new lot to build a primary residence and this accessory dwelling unit, you'd still have to meet that minimum. If you are in a lot of areas in the city, the lots existed prior to the adoption of the comprehensive plan back in '94, and so you actually have a lot of situations in the downtown area where the lots are much smaller than are actually the zoning district that they're in that was imposed on them in '94 permits. And so for those units, as long as they maintain the setbacks, they could be allowed, just as long as they maintain certain elements like the setbacks and things. So you would still basically have to comply with all of the requirements for each of the zoning districts that you were in.
And of course, this doesn't supersede any HOA regulations or...
Yes, Mr. Chair, correct. That would be correct. If you're in a plan development, or you have a standard non-plan development but a regular residential development, and they have a homeowners association with documents that state what is permissible, that can supersede. You wouldn't be requiring neighborhoods to accept accessory dwelling units, but at the same time, they could write their homeowners documents or amend their homeowners documents to allow for them if they're currently excluded.
Correct. That's what I was.
Be an enforcement mechanism within that subdivision.
Okay.
So there would be nothing in our ordinance or our code that specified neighborhoods when you couldn't do that.
All right. That's what I wanted to make sure of, because some people move into HOAs just to have the protections that an HOA provides. Personally, I hate them, but I wouldn't want to take that away from them, by passing this ordinance.
Yeah, this would neither require existing neighborhoods with HOAs or future neighborhoods with HOAs to accept them, and likewise, it wouldn't prohibit them. So.
Brent, I just have a couple questions about a wording issue. On point 4, you brought it up that there's only one ADU allowed per lot, but that point 4 where it says standards, it says each accessory dwelling unit. That's under 4.2.4.1. That word "each," when I read it the first time before your presentation, almost implied that there could be more than one per lot, at least as I read that initially. I don't know if that needs any clarity or not.
It could certainly be modified to any or something.
Or the.
Right.
And then on building size, just, I want to make sure I understand that, because it says a maximum of 50% or 1,000 square feet, whichever is greater. So theoretically, if you had a 900 square foot primary residence, you could build a 1,000 square foot ADU.
The way it's written, yes, sir, that would be correct.
Okay.
In which case, then you might decide that the
The
addition is
the ADU is
their
now the
primary residence.
And so that was just a question, would that cause any headache moving forward? Because it doesn't matter which one is designated as the ADU and which one is the primary residence.
That would certainly be my interpretation, that he either could function as the primary at
It's
that
just,
point.
one has to be
Yeah.
designated, okay.
Mhm.
And then the other question I had was, the 700 gallons per day, is that a water management district? I just wondered how that number came about.
It was borrowed from the existing code that I,
Okay.
that I blatantly plagiarized some of the code from
Okay.
existing ordinances.
And again, as long as the city feels comfortable with that number, then that was just a question of where that number came from. Other questions for staff? All right. Anyone want to make a motion?
I move to approve ordinance 2018-01, LDR 18-02.
This motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to add, amending section 4241, item 4, standards, lining out each, putting in the, or, changing each to the, so that there's no misconception about how many are on each lot.
All right.
That's my addition to the motion.
All right, it's been moved, seconded with an amendment. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. There it is. All right, the date the application will first be heard by the city commission, I assume is February 12th?
Mr. Chair, it may be
Okay.
February 12th. There might be some additional work with the city attorney to just make sure that we're complying with state statutes as well. If it's complete the review is complete by then, it would be the 12th. Otherwise, we'd go to the 2nd.
All right, so the earliest date would be February 12th.
At this time, I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. We have no old business. Topics or members for discussion. Start with Mr. Conrad. Mr. Boyer.
We still have that group of young leaders out there trying to get petitions for their single-member district charter initiative for the county. And I ask everybody to please go to their website. If they're go to Facebook, it's Represent Me. Download a petition, mail it in, drop it off. There's plenty of places, plenty of people that will help, and we just need more.
When do those have to be turned in by?
We've got till the middle of February before the time frame for the petition collection is over. So we're running out of time, and just need all hands, need everybody to help us do this and help make their project successful. As far as all they're trying to do is get this on the ballot.
We got some here, if y'all members want to just write your name and address on them and sign them.
Ms. Laird, any comments? Ms. Baker? All right, I don't have any. Any from the staff?
Yes, sir.
All right, with that, meeting adjourned. Do we have to vote on that? right. All right, we'll call to order the Historical Architectural Review Board meeting for Monday, January 9th, 2018. Let's call the order. We'll get approval of the agenda, which is approval of the minutes of the July 3rd, October 2nd, and November 6th, 2017 minutes. There's no old business, and new business is an application CA 17-02. Topics from members for discussion and adjournment. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So,
All right, will the motion a second?
second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Has everybody looked over the minutes from July, October, and November?
Yeah. Motion,
It's been moved, second?
second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, motion carries. All right, new business is application CA 17-02, a request by George William Freeman and Marty Ann Freeman, owners, for a certificate of appropriateness to allow a change from asphalt shingle to metal roofing materials for a roof replacement at 25467 Southwest First Avenue, located within the Newberry Historic District. Wendy.
Good evening. I want to preface the presentation on the application with just a couple points that are relevant to implementing the historic district regulations that we have here in the city of Newberry. One is that we mentioned before that you have all of the regulations that are available to you online on the MuniCode site, but we're in the process of preparing a handbook for you that will have all your regulations from the land development regulations and, did I say that twice? But also the comprehensive plan amendment policies, things that apply, any of the design guidelines that the U.S. Interior has, some of those extra things that will help you when you're reviewing these things, so you'll have it all in one place. So that will be prepared for you, or it's in the process of doing that. And the second thing is that in going through this application and then talking to a few other people who have come forward inquiring about changes to their properties in the historic district, we realized that we really need to make some changes to our code. And in looking at this particular request with the roof changing, as you know, that part of the Florida vernacular styling that allows for metal roofing. It does have asphalt shingle, but metal roofing is very prominent in most historic districts, encourage that. In fact, our own design guidelines recommends that, but it addresses commercial, industrial, and multifamily as the types of uses that it applies to. So we need to change the portion where, when we're talking about design guidelines as guidelines, that it applies to the whole district, and that if someone comes forward with something that's consistent with the Florida vernacular style, that they would not have to come forward and get a certificate of appropriateness to go through this process, which delays them a couple of, a month or 6 weeks, or depending on where they fall in their application timing. And then, of course, the cost of actually advertising and mailing out and that kind of thing. But so there are a couple sections in our code that we'll bring back before you at the next time, either next meeting or the meeting after, so we can get this going and make some changes to make things easier for those in the district, and so that you're not reviewing things that seem quite obvious. But then the things that are definitely changing the exterior as it's visible to the public that make a definite change, you want to be able to review those and see that they're consistent. But in this case, we could say that if it's consistent, it'd be good. It wouldn't require one. But we'll bring that before you. Okay. So the application before you tonight.
Oh, I'm so
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair. I believe this is a quasi-judicial procedure, and so since Ms. Kinzer has just been talking about general items before and what they're bringing back, if we can go ahead and read the quasi-judicial again and swear in our witnesses.
All right. I will read the following. All public testimony will be taken under oath. Everyone testifying will be subject to cross-examination. All documents and exhibits shall be entered into evidence. The giving of opinion testimony is limited to experts, and the closing arguments will be limited to the evidence or record. The procedure we will follow this evening is that we will first hear from the applicant. The applicant presentation has no time limit. The applicant will then be subject to cross-examination. The staff will then enter the staff report into the record and answer questions. The applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal of any testimony against the applicant. The floor will be opened for public comment. Each presentation will be limited to 5 minutes, and members of the public will have an opportunity to question the applicant or the staff. The applicant will have an opportunity for closing arguments, and the public hearing then will be closed, and the commission will enter into deliberations. Anyone wishing to speak during this procedure should stand, raise their right hand, and repeat after me. This is a separate procedure. So, do you hereby swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give is the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. All right. So first we'll hear from the applicant.
And as the applicant's coming up, if any member of the as the Historic Architectural Review Board has any ex parte communication that they need to disclose, now would be the time to do so.
I'm neighbors with the Freemans and friends, and we have had some conversation about the house.
General architectural and historical portions of the house, nothing to do specific with this.
I just have to disclose it.
I
It
know.
doesn't mean
Yep.
I still get to know it.
And Mr. Conrad, yes, with making that disclosure, you are confident that you could still sit here tonight, listen to the evidence as it's presented, and make your decision based on the competent, substantial evidence that's presented and not from any outside conversation that you may have had.
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm seeing negative responses from the rest of the
No.
plan board? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Proceed, sir.
Not sure if there's anything that we really need to say. You've got our application. I think it's pretty much a slam dunk, particularly after hearing what we just did about the appropriateness of what we're trying to do. So, is this when you ask me questions? 'Cause I don't think I've got anything really to say.
If you're done with your presentation.
I think so. Is that it?
Well, stick around, because we might, if there's questions from the board for the applicant. Mr. Boyer has a question for you, so please return to the mic.
And this is only
Yes.
because I'm interested. How old is your house? When was it
That's a
built?
really good question. We're pretty sure that the front part of the house was built probably sometime in the 1917 era, somewhere in that neighborhood. The longer portion on the, running north-south, the southern end of the house, where the garage and the different roof style was probably built in the 80s by the people who resurrected that house. I've seen pictures of what that house looked like before they started. And in working on the house, I've said some very, very bad things about the people who worked on that house and the choices they made. But after seeing what they started with, I talked to the lady, the wife of the couple that actually did the resurrection. And I told her that I'm very sorry for all of the bad things I thought about you, and I take it all back. You did miracles with this house based on what you started with. So the front part of the house, probably about 1917. The rest of it, they built, they said in the 80s, that they built it out of lumber, which is mostly what we've been talking about, lumber that it was apparently salvaged from either an old church or an old schoolhouse that was being torn down in the neighborhood at the time. So the rest of the house, at least its bones, the majority of it is reclaimed lumber from buildings at least as old.
Okay.
Was that the Ashleys that you
Yes.
talked to? Was that the Ashleys?
I don't know, what was the name of the lady? Yeah,
Pat-
Ashley's,
Pat
yes.
Ashley?
Yes, Pat, it was Pat, yeah, if you'd said
Yeah,
Pat, I would have remembered.
It started in the, after 1980 when they started building
Yeah.
and changing.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, Pat Ashley just showed up one day on her front porch and talked, we've seen her a couple of times.
Yeah.
Her and her kids and her grandkids have come by to look at the house they grew up in.
Excellent. Any other questions for the applicant?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Ms. Wendy.
Wendy Kinzer, Principal Planner for the City of Newberry. The application before you, when you asked about the house, the historic survey that was done in updated in 2011 shows it as circa 1912 for the home. And Wanda knows all about that. Okay, so the application, let's see, let's see if this is working or not. No, okay, next, okay. The application before you for the Freeman's home to replace the roof, going from the shingle roof to a metal roof. The property is located, as you can see on the map, on the southeast corner of Southwest First Avenue and Southwest 255th Street. The next slide shows you the historic district. Generally, it's hard to see that, but generally, you've got the little homes, the little blocks there showing where the homes are, and some of the ones that are actually listed as contributing resources on our in our historic survey and as a part of our historic district. The house that the Freemans have now, if you go to the next slide, there's a couple of pictures here. You can see in the front, that's what Mr. Freeman was alluding to with the front of the gable roof that was part of the original home. And then it also has, you can see the craftsman styling and the ornamentation. But it's in the back, that's where they've done a couple of non-historic additions, but they look great. And I'll point out too that in our own land development regulations, we include a photo of this home as one of the examples of the great architecture and styling that's in the district, and as an example of the type of thing that we want to see. Looking at this as being part of the historic district, and since our district is listed on the historic register, it makes all those properties that are within that which are contributing resources as part of that district and considered as part of the listing of the historic register, on the historic register. And meaning a contributing resource means essentially that it's something that either a property or a building that contributes to the integrity, the historical integrity of that historic district that makes it significant. It's either architectural or some other aspect of that site. And that's one of the important features of our district. And the certificate of appropriateness is required whenever you make any exterior change that's visible to the public. You go through, and in the case of being shingle to metal, that's going to be a change that's visible. Now, we don't want to have to come and do that every time like we talked about earlier. So making a change that's consistent with the Florida vernacular will be something that we'd want to be able to enable and encourage people that are located in the district for their homes. The regulations that we have in our code now that requires to come before you, we looked at the area in the historic district. If you go to the next couple of slides, the next one shows you another property that's on First Avenue that has a metal roof, you can see. And then the next slide has a couple, you can see the arrows they put in there to try to show you a couple of the places. That's the middle one being on 255th Street, and the other at the bottom also on Southwest First Avenue. It just shows you, and these are 3 homes that are on Southwest First Avenue on this slide. To the north of this property, just diagonally across the street, that all show you, you can see them in a row, that they're all have metal roofs included on their properties. And I just did a detail of a couple of them so you could see what they looked like. So with that said, the staff would recommend approval, and that would be done by adopting the resolution that you have in your packet, and that includes the requirements that are need to be in the resolution, and that is consistent with the district and is allowed by the regulations. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Questions for staff?
I do. Outside of a historic district, I see a lot of people putting in either colored metal roof or painted metal roofs. Do we have a restriction limiting a color for the roof? I mean, or does it have to be the matte steel that I traditionally would associate with a historic house?
within the district, it's supposed to be consistent with the Florida vernacular, and that's what our regulations say. It doesn't delineate specifically, okay, you've got to have this color on this house or this color on that. It doesn't go to that extent. But historically, they didn't have the colored metal roofs. So in looking at the old pictures of this site, of this property and of the district, they having the metal roofs, they had some and some that did not. But if you go to other historic districts throughout the state of Florida, they also have many of the different metal roofs. And you do see some places allowing the colored roofs, the colored metal roofs, but ours doesn't speak to that directly, so it would be a matter of if the applicant was requesting that, for you to consider that. But a recommendation at this time is just to go with the basic. Is that not good? That's not good. It's my understanding, it was just the, that's. But galvanized, like a
Galvanized
galvanized. Yeah, but it's a.
More of an earth tone.
My understanding, yeah, it's. I'll leave that to the.
Well, I was getting at, it's not black, it's not brown.
Red.
It's
Red.
still red. It's still consistent with what you would, a gray tone, metallic
Yes,
tone.
yeah, the applicant has the opportunity to come up
Sure,
and.
no problem. Yes, I considered silver because I knew that was historically right, but looking at those pictures, there's a lot of roof on that house. And I was concerned that much silver, even though it would have been more economical, it would have been better at reflecting heat, I decided that it would have been a little bit distracting or garish to put that much silver that much silver roof on a house that big. As it originally was, it was probably 1,500 square feet of house, and it was a hip roof. Would not have looked bad, but with that additional long section and everything, that I was concerned that it would not look right in the district, that it would be distracting, and so I went with the lightest color that I thought I could get away with.
Which actually subdues the reflections
It does.
off
It's
of the.
less reflective. It's not gonna blind people driving down the road in the late afternoon, because a big hunk of that roof does face west. But I did want to reflect as much as possible without becoming an irritation to my neighbors or making the house stand out more than a big house like that already does.
And my other thought was, you're not changing the design of the roof or
Oh,
the
no,
roof line
no.
or anything like that.
Mm-mm.
You're just
Nope.
pulling asphalt off and putting metal on.
We're putting the metal. We're doing whatever the roofer says to do. So no, we're not changing the roof line at all. Everything's going back just like it is, as far as the shape of the roof and looks. Okay.
That's
Alright.
all I got.
All right, any other questions for staff?
If I might, staff would support that kind of, if that's the idea, because that really makes a lot of sense. I have read in some other districts, I'm not sure, I could look up to see which one, where they had a similar instance where it was a huge surface that was going to be covered, and they made a decision to make it a lighter color and not the total silver color. So I think this situation does make sense as far as staff's recommendation.
Anybody from the public want to make any comments? All right, so at this point, the applicant want to make any other last-ditch?
Sure. One more thing. Kind of speaking to what she was saying earlier, you've got a very good staff here, and particularly in a situation that we have in a historic district, it's not like I'm asking, or anyone coming before this board would be saying, I want to show you something that you've never seen before. This house has been here for over 100 years. You all know what it looks like. You drive past it. If you went to high school here, you drove past it twice a day. So there were really no surprises involved in what house we're talking about, or what anybody, I'm sure all of you already knew, if you've lived in Newberry any length of time, you already knew what this house looked like. You didn't even need to look at the pictures. And your staff knows what it looks like. And the idea of there are certain things that they can look at and say, we don't need to bring this to the board. This is a slam dunk. This is a no-brainer. Putting a metal roof on a 100-year-old house, that's a slam dunk. It does not need to be brought before a board for anybody's permission. I never even considered that anybody would want to argue whether or not a metal roof belonged on a house of that age. If you're going to make things like you're doing, like you're proposing, yes, if as the homeowner, I go and I say, I want to do this, they said, great, that sounds great, go ahead and do it. But if they had said no, I would like the opportunity to bring it before the whole board and appeal the decision of staff and say, hey, I think that this really does work in a historic sense. So allowing them, they're putting their jobs on the line, their professional reputations on the line by approving it. So I don't think that there's going to much, if any, chance of abuse of staff saying, oh, well, we'll just let this one slide. You've got good people, and it's houses and properties that are well known in the community, that if they look at it and say, yes, that's going to work, go for it. And then if they do something that the homeowner doesn't like and says, no, you can't do that, then let the homeowner bring it to you and make their case. But I think if staff looks at it and says, yeah, I think this should go, they need to have the freedom of doing that, instead of having to go through the several months that we've waited on this, several months of the materials sitting in my front yard or my side yard in the way, and the inconvenience of having to wait. I wouldn't be putting a roof on the house. I'm not doing it just because I like the looks. I'm doing it because I need a new roof on the house in a couple of months, particularly with all the rain we've had lately. I've really been sweating it, and it's been a little bit of a hardship. I would say it has been a hardship waiting on the board for something that I think that staff should have been able to handle. So please strongly consider not making another homeowner have to go through something I think this obvious and this easy for staff to decide. So please amend your ordinance.
Mr. Chair, if I could speak to that, just so you
Sure.
know that the way that would work is with staff being able to review someone's, if they're inquiring, saying, hey, I think we're going to do this, anything that wasn't immediately obvious would go before you for you to make that decision of whether it's appropriate or not. If it's not consistent, as our regulations show, the type of Florida vernacular styling and the U.S. interior standards, it would be very obvious that to us, and anything on the just kind of wondering, that would come to you. So if there's anything that doesn't just automatically fit. The application we received was December 15th or 14th,
14th.
stated 14th, when we received Mr. and Mrs. Freeman's application. I'm not sure if, what happened before that, but as soon as we knew about it, we immediately got that going. So we were like, oh my gosh, I didn't want you to think that, because we want to facilitate this and make things move along quickly. We certainly don't want to hold up. We know it costs money, so thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to add to what Ms. Kinzer said, in any decisions that the LDR administrator does have the authority to make, the applicant always has the opportunity to appeal that. There's a whole appeals process in our code that allows for that. So
Okay, great.
there would always be that opportunity as a backup. For this, this would be a little different, because rather than deny, we would recommend it would go before the Historic Architectural Review Board for
Okay.
their determination.
All right. At this point, the public hearing is closed. Any questions, conversation, deliberation by the board?
Just like to point out that, when we meet as planning and zoning, we make recommendations to the commission, but when we meet as HR, historic review board, we're the final authority. So it is expedited a little bit because it doesn't have to go to any more levels. We vote to pass this resolution, Matt signs it, and then walk out the door with the certificate of appropriateness. So I'm ready to make a motion if the attorney will read the title. Make a motion.
This is resolution number HARBCA 17-02, a resolution of the Historic Architectural Review Board of the City of Newberry, Florida for approval of a certificate of appropriateness authorized under Section 11.11 of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations, providing for alteration of the outside exterior of a building or structure that is visible to the public, allowing a change from asphalt shingle to metal roofing materials for a roof replacement on a home which is designated historic by the provisions of the City of Newberry Land Development Regulations and is located at 25467 Southwest First Avenue within the Newberry Historic District, repealing all resolutions in conflict and providing an effective date. The appropriate motion is to pass resolution number HARBCA 17-02, authorizing a approval of a certificate of appropriateness.
Second.
Moved and second. Any other discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. Any topics from members for discussion for the Harbor Board?
No, but I did have one question that just came to mind. Now, we just passed this. Is this just specific for them, or does this allow staff to move forward on issues like this without having to come to us first?
This is
This is
just
just-
specific
This is just
to them.
specific to them right now.
And so that's why it was a quasi-judicial,
Okay.
because it's a decision you're
It's
making
not
on an
just simply
individual
legislative.
applicant. Right.
Okay.
So we'll bring back before you the changes to the code that you can look at and recommend to the city commission as to whether they should approve changes that will make it easier for everyone.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other topics? All right.
Anybody not fill out an application or a petition to get single-member districts on the ballot for the Alachua County ballot? We got some petitions up here. We're trying to, we're working with some young leaders here in Newberry, and we're helping them with their school project. This is what they chose to do, and we're just trying to help make it successful for them. So any help we can get is much appreciated.
Anything else? All right, meeting adjourned.